Woo! Welcome everybody to Marpedo. This is my first YouTube video of this channel, and what this is it is an audiobook series based on the novel which I had written about a year or so ago and self-published on Amazon. And in case you want to buy a copy of it, it's on Amazon right now. It's under Liuith, Legend of the Winged Kingdom. I'll put a link to that down below. And if you don't want to purchase it, that's fine as well. You can go on Wattpad and all the chapters are up there. And also, if you don't want to read it but you want to listen to it, well, here's the good thing about it. Today is the day I'm starting a chapter by chapter audiobook series for it. So this is the first of what I'm going to be including into this YouTube channel. There's going to be a lot more things like vlogging, although I don't want to tell you exactly how I'm going to vlog it because I feel like it would be an interesting way I'm going to do that. So here's the first chapter. Well, actually it's the prologue, but welcome to my channel, and hopefully you'll like this. This is going to be my first time actually doing something like this. For those of you who love audiobooks, I hope you enjoy it. And here we go. Liuith, Legend of the Winged Kingdom. Book 1. Crescent Moon, Sun, Star, and Lightning. Prologue. Where we were. They say our soul is intertwined with that of another, that our hearts beat rhythmically in sync, and when together we are one. There's a bond not even the strongest of weapons could sever. Dear brother of mine, I'll be the light in your day, as you are my light of the moon at night. We burn inside the hearts of each other, for together we are one, forever and always. MF. As the lights of the city shined fluorescent throughout, and had been so bright that it seemed to have reflected the hearts of the people surrounded, Caton found himself wandering along, only 8 years old and not remembering the city well enough to know his way home. He bit his lip, and he let his eyes wander, searching for a girl with chestnut hair and amethyst lavender eyes. As his hand lifted in front of him, he noticed dark brown grime, dirt, from when he and his sister were playing out in the meadow again. But once they entered the city, they lost sight of each other. The air was muggy from all the lights and cooking, wrapping young Caton in a blanket of painless heat. "Anna!" Caton called out through the crowd of people in his medium-pitched voice. Anna meant sis, or sister in their world. Some people looked back. Their eyes were tight and hard on Caton and sent chills running up and down his spine. What had they been looking at? He thought. Caton darted forward and pushed softly past the crowds of people in front of him, eyes widening, searching in all directions for his sister. Suddenly, a gust of hardened hands roughly thrust Caton backward, hard enough to knock the air from his lungs. He fell, scraping his back on the stone ground. Slowly, Caton tried to settle himself upright. Appearing before him was a young boy, about a year or two older than himself, with pale skin and golden hair and blue eyes. He was inches taller than Caton, and, forming behind him like shadows, was a group of about a dozen children, about the same size and age as Caton. Caton could feel his heart rapidly pound against the inside of his chest, and his throat tightened. The pain did hurt, but it ached more that someone he did not know meant him harm. As Caton slowly began getting up, his eyes wandered all around him. Were there any adults around to see this? What he saw was that any adults around him looked at him with complete disregard, turning away and going about their business like nothing had happened. A smaller boy, a shadow of the boy that pushed him, crept forward to stand next to the blonde-haired boy, except this boy had mahogany hair with the same blue eyes. Brothers, he assumed, for he recognized Cal, the brunette boy, to be in his class at Lefolkai's Academy, where Caton and his sister went to school. "Is this the little brat that's causing you trouble?" Cal's older brother spoke, with a voice deeper than he seemed to possess. For some reason, it reminded Caton of a bear. Cal nodded, and his eyes bored into Caton's with a smirk forming in his mouth. Caton tightened his fist. "I haven't done anything, so if you'll excuse me, I'll be leaving now," Caton began as he slowly turned his back onto the crowd. "Wow, you aren't as strong as I would have imagined. But then again, you're pretty stupid looking as it is," Cal's brother began in a nasty tone, although it cracked here and there. He continued, It seems like nobody in your class, school, hell, even an entire city likes you or your ugly sister." At that, Caden's seat tightened, and he quickly turned back around. "Well, actually, they hate you," the boy finished. Caden, generally known as a peaceful boy, tried to calm himself with a deep breath, but couldn't hold his anger very long. He slowly turned to walk away. "If there's anyone causing trouble right now, it's you, Cal. I haven't done anything, and you know it. I'm sure everyone does, given that you're a known bully in school. Most of your friends fear you. And you call that friendship?" Caden retorted, unable to control the anger within. Cal took a step forward. "How dare you? You see, brother, he is trying to make me look stupid." Caden smiled coolly. "Now I know that isn't my doing. You surely don't need me to make you look stupid," he finished, hearing all the gasps all around him and whispers of anger growing louder. Cal's brother's footsteps grew closer, and Caden whirled around, prepared to take a punch like he'd received before. Cal's brother's eyes fixated angrily on Caden, eyebrows curled forward and mouth twisted in a snarl. Suddenly, a familiar shadow bolted in front of Caden, and with a sidekick knocked the blonde-haired boy to the ground, letting him roll on the street. The smaller figure with chestnut hair and light chocolate-brown skin arced forward, landing on both feet and slowly propping herself upright. In her right hand was a sword, a silver hilt, and aqua base that arced up. The other kids standing around gasped, and their eyes flared. They scattered and fled like mice, Cal among them. Himokru's eyes were wild and fueled with a fire as she turned behind to look at Caden. He shook his head gently, to let her know that he was fine. Himokru let out a relieved sigh and smiled awkwardly at Cal's brother, who stared at her while his hand felt his already swelling cheek. With a sudden panic, he burst forward and ran away. I wonder why he's so scared of me," Himokru teased in her soft voice, laughing with Caden, who felt his heart warm up with light. Although at times he did not need it, his sister was always rushing to his side and protecting him, and he loved her for it. Caden smiled widely back at Himokru, noticing her sword, but before he could ask her what it was and where she got it from, whispers from all the adults began echoing in the distance. "Problem. Evil monsters. Kill them." And worse echoed in the air. Himokru's eyes hardened, along with her fists, glaring at the adults in the city. Not all were glowering at the two of them, but most were. Caden's aquamarine eyes grew cautious as a man in brown robes began approaching them with what they assumed to be his wife. He had yellow skin, dark black hair, and brown eyes. The woman had green skin with blue eyes, hair and robe stretching long past her feet so that it was unseen. "You two are evil little monsters. The world doesn't want you. Nobody wants you," the man declared in a fuming voice, each word tearing through Caden's heart like knives. As tears began to form in his eyes, Himokru could see him fighting them back. Himokru clutched her weapon tight in her palm, and her eyes tensed and her body stiffened up rigidly. The man and woman stared with wide eyes at her, surprised she was angry and not crying submissively, the way they believed she should be. "Say another word to my brother and I, and by all means I will show you just how evil I can be," Himokru spat, thrusting her weapon in front of her, taking the couple by such surprise that they recoiled in fear, nearly staggering back and falling on top of one another. The man cursed under his breath, and both he and his woman began walking away. Himokru, ignoring the rest of the whisperers of the city people, turned to look at Caden, whose body was shaking. Her eyes softened on her brother's, and she rushed towards him, butting her forehead against his, catching him by surprise as he staggered back. Himokru, chuckling like a chipmunk, shut her eyes as Caden's confused and awkward face had made her laugh. Caden blinked, and after a moment his frown turned into a bemused sigh. The tears went away as a burst of wind grew in his stomach, and he found himself laughing. His sister was a strange character, that much he was certain. "Himokru, where have you been?" Caden asked, letting the laughter suffuse through him. At that, Himokru's eyes sparkled, full of mischievous light. She thrust her weapon in front of her, inches away from Caden, who jumped back. "Hey, be careful, would ya?" Caden called, with laughter in his voice, enjoying his sister's enthusiasm. "We're supposed to go see Alico, remember?" she began. "But you got lost, so I ended up running off with this accidentally to come find you. It came in handy, too. But we gotta get back. Alico made this for me. Isn't it cool? His first sword and my first sword." Himokru bounced with enthusiasm, and Caden chuckled, watching her. "I hope I get one too," he stated, smiling at his sister. Memories swarmed Caden's mind. The people in the city had always looked at them with wary expressions as they grew up, and rumors spread about them being as evil as their parents. The people always picked on either of them and looked down on them like refuse on the city's streets. But whenever they accosted Kaiten in the streets or lashed out at him, Himokuru was always there to protect him. Later that night, young Kaiten and Himokuru walked along the riverbed that shined a pale blue and glowed beneath the dark of the starry night sky. The river cut through a set of trees. On the right bank to the east was the forest, and on the west was the foci. Beyond the river and the forest, the pair could see a glimmer of white light that faintly glistened from the distance they stood at. Both Himokuru and Kaiten shared significant looks. "Anna, no, we have to get home," Kaiten urged. But young Himokuru saw no harm in a little adventure. Their guardians wouldn't mind as long as they got home within an hour. "Well, come on, Ani. Let's just see what that is. Real quick?" Himokuru pouted. Kaiten threw an admonishing look at his sister, but eventually agreed. The night's wind was cold against their skin, almost as though there were miniature icicles dripping liquid onto their skins. Himokuru and Kaiten darted forward through the forest toward the shine of the faint white light. As they reached the forest edge, the light suddenly became bright and flared up, blinding both the twins as they winced back in surprise. The both of them were blinded for a moment, and after a few seconds the light died down, and the whole forest now glowed in a transparent white, unlike anything they've ever seen before. Lying on the ground, feet away from Himokuru, was a diamond that shined with the same brilliant light that had blinded them moments ago. "Himokuru!" Kaiten started, but Himokuru reached for the diamond and picked it up. In that instant, the both of them were hit by winds that pummeled them from all sides, making them start to lose their balance. They had to shut their eyes against the pressure of the light and sound. The forest scenery changed dramatically. They now stood in a forest with giant oak trees that ranged as tall as skyscrapers with thick sides. The trees had moss on them as though they had been there for centuries. The sun was out, which was odd, because in the foci it was night, and they were on their way home. As they turned around to view the city, wondering why the sound of crickets and animals echoed solely in the area, their stomachs turned. The city was no longer there. There were only draperies of leaves from trees and vines with the radiant glow of a warm sunlight seeping through all corners. It was warm out. Himokuru and Kaiten looked at one another. Anna? Where are we?" Kaiten asked, confused and wary. Himokuru swallowed. "I have no idea," she replied truthfully. In her hand, she grasped a diamond about the size of a dragon's tooth. It glimmered with a myriad of rainbow colors from the illumination brought on by the sunlight. There were rivers everywhere before them and bridges made of branches that crossed them. The bright shamrock green grass was short and soft against their feet. Himokuru darted forward to explore, leaving a worrisome Kaiten to follow behind her. "Anna, come on, we have to figure out a way to get home. This is kind of scary. We don't even know what this place is," Kaiten called out after his sister. They raced throughout the forest that echoed all kinds of sounds. Birds and insects of the sort. Toward what looked like the end of the forest was a curtain of vines and leaves that draped between two trees. It blocked the vision of what lay beyond, and the sunlight glistened off the scenery around them. "Anna!" Kaiten urged harder as he reached for Himokuru, who stood beside him. Her lavender amethyst eyes glowed from the sun, and she was peering towards the blocked view thoughtfully. Kaiten knew that look. She was driven by adrenaline, excitement, and impulse. Himokuru quickly turned to look at Kaiten with a wide grin. "Ani, trust me," Himokuru insisted. Kaiten glared. "But we don't even know—" Himokuru's eyes hardened on her brother's. "Trust me," was all she said. Kaiten took a moment and eventually caved in. He did trust his sister. "Let's go," Himokuru whispered. "Don't worry, Ani. I can feel it. This place is safe." At that, Kaiten tried to force his mind to relax, along with his nerves, and took a deep breath in. "Okay," he finally agreed. "This better be fun then," he smirked. "Oh, it will be," Himokuru finished, and within seconds the pair raced forward as a light blinded their vision just long enough to reveal a bright morning and a hill of grass. The both of them stood on a 100-acre grassy hill that led down to a gigantic crystal nearly 100 feet tall and equally as wide. Its sharp edges pointed out in different directions. Around the area past the grass hill were walls of light tan rocks. Himokuru and Kaiten shared looks and smiles. They continued to race below towards the crystal. They were laughing and breathing heavily as they raced down below. The sun bounced off their skins and warmed the hairs on their backs. They felt so free and lighter than air. But Once they reached the bottom, the both of them staggered back in surprise as they realized figures were frozen within the crystal. Figures that neither one of them recognized. "Whoa," Himokuru breathed. They stood in front of a boy with brown skin and black spiked hair. His eyes were closed. He was thin and was dressed in a black t-shirt and pants, no shoes. In his palm he grasped a gold heart-shaped locket with the letter A on it. "What is this?" Kaiten whispered. Himokuru shook her head. "I have no idea." The pair followed the crystal's base to their right, and more people were frozen within the ice crystal. The next figure next to the boy was a girl with pale skin and red hair. She wore a satin gold dress and had brown freckles throughout her face and arms. Himoku's heart beat rapidly within her chest, and as she walked along the crystal, she gasped. Himoku's heart beat rapidly within her chest, and as she walked along the crystal, she grasped the smaller crystal in her hand. She laid her free hand onto the piece of the icy wall in front of her. Instantly, a light shined between her and Kaiten once again, and voices of all kinds overlapped one another, echoed between the two of them, coming together in one discernible phrase. "There will be a time where darkness swallows your heart and take over you. But on that day, find the brightest openings, the silent glimmer of light and hope, and grasp it. For we are all bounded by darkness, but we are born into the light." And with that, Himokuru continued to grasp the crystal in one hand and reached out the other for her brother, who gripped her hand tightly. Darkness swept over them, and before they knew it, they woke up near the river by the city of Lafokai. They were home. Kaiten shot upright in his bed, sweat trailing down his forehead and neck. His eyes were wide in the darkness, and he rubbed them with the back of his blue long-sleeved shirt. Next to him, the wooded window outlined the view of the sky, with the night sky forming like a blanket of darkness above. Stars lit up the sky like lanterns, and the moon dangled above, shining beautifully. The window was cracked open a couple inches, and the cold breeze soothed the sweat that stuck to his face with brushes of its icy fingers. Kaiten exhaled, feeling the beauty of the real world and nature all around him. He was just dreaming of past memories.